The scrapyard was never quiet for long, but tonight it felt different. A strange heaviness pressed down on the air, like a storm waiting to break. Ethan Cole, the mechanic who had inherited this pile of rust and steel from his late father, sat hunched over an old generator. The sparks from his welder hissed, bouncing shadows across the cluttered workshop walls. It was his routine, fixing the broken things others had thrown away. Machines didn't complain. Machines didn't betray. They either worked or they didn't. Ethan liked the honesty of it. But then the roar came. It was so sudden, so raw, that it sliced through the steady hum of his torch and made his heart leap into his throat. He froze, hands clamped on the tool, sparks dying midair. The sound carried across the night like rolling thunder, but deeper, older, something that stirred an instinct of fear in his blood. He turned off the welder, silence crashing around him. The scrapyard stretched into the distance outside, mound of cars and twisted metal rising like grave markers. The moonlight poured silver across it all, and then he saw the shadow. It moved above the horizon, vast and fluid, wings slicing through the clouds. Ethan's breath hitched. He told himself it was a plane, maybe a storm drone, but as the shape descended, he knew better. His chest tightened. His instinct screamed to hide, but his legs carried him forward, out into the open yard. The ground shook when it landed, a mountain of living scale, and sinew slammed down amid the heaps of scrap. Rusted doors and loose sheets of metal toppled noisily, the crash echoing into the night. Ethan staggered back, throwing up an arm to shield himself from flying dust. His ears rang with the weight of that landing. And then he saw his eyes. Twin embers of molten gold stared into him, fierce yet desperate. The dragon's breath hissed like steam, fogging the cold night air. It shifted, lowering its claws, and Ethan finally saw what it carried. It wasn't treasure. It was a child, small, fragile compared to the massive beast that held it. The creature lay limp, its skin a faint glowing blue, threaded with veins that shimmered like silver lightning. The child let out a broken gasp, weak, almost fading. Ethan's jaw went slack. His mind refused to accept what his eyes delivered. The dragon's voice rumbled low, thick and strained with an accent that bent around human words. "Help, my child." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He stumbled back 2 steps, shaking his head. "What were you? How do you—" The dragon leaned closer, hot breath rushing over him. Its massive head lowered until its teeth gleamed like ivory knives in the moonlight. "Mechanic," it growled, each word pushed out with effort. "Fix. Save." Ethan's pulse raced so fast he thought it might explode. His instinct screamed again, run, hide, get away from this nightmare. But then his gaze darted back to the small body in its claws. The child was dying. Its shallow chest rose and fell in sharp, broken gasps. The faint glow of its veins dimmed with each breath. A sound, pitiful and weak, slipped from its throat. And in that moment, Ethan saw not an alien but a child. His hands clenched. He forced himself to breathe. His father had once told him, "When you see something broken, you don't walk away. You fix it. That's what it means to be human." And this child was broken. What happened to it? Ethan's voice shook, but he forced the words out. The dragon's eyes blazed with pain. Human metal. Burned. Poisoned. The words slammed into him. Human weapons? His stomach twisted, but there was no time to untangle questions. The child's glow flickered like a dying candle. Ethan spun on his heel and bolted into his workshop. His breath came in sharp bursts as he shoved boxes aside, yanked open drawers. His hands grabbed at anything he thought could help. An old medkit, cracked oxygen tubing, clamps, wire, a soldering tool, a crack scanner he'd been tinkering with. His mind spun. None of this was meant for saving lives. But maybe, just maybe, it could keep a spark alive long enough. He returned, his arms full. The dragon had lowered the child onto the gravel, curling protectively around it. Its claws trembled, scraping furrows in the dirt. Its massive chest heaved, but its eyes never left Ethan. Ethan dropped to his knees, sweat already running down his face. He pressed his palm to the child's chest. It was burning hot. Too hot. He swallowed hard, blinking against the glow under its skin. The burn wound was jagged, angry, seared deep by some kind of energy he didn't understand. "This isn't just a cut," he muttered. "Damn it." The dragon growled, a low rumble that shook the ground. Ethan snapped his eyes up, fear flashing. "I'm trying," he shouted, voice cracking. "You want me to save it? You've got to let me work." A tense silence hung heavy between them. The dragon's head hovered above him, close enough for Ethan to feel its heat on his neck. Finally, the great beast lowered its gaze and growled one word. "Work." Ethan let out a shaky breath. He fumbled with the tubing, jerry-rigging it to the cracked air pump. He pressed it gently against the child's mouth, forcing air through. He soldered wires, attaching them to the scanner, repurposing it into a crude stabilizer. His hands moved fast, guided by desperation and instinct. The dragon loomed, its breath rumbling, its eyes flickering with something sharp and fragile. "Hope, come on," Ethan whispered to the child, voice low. "Stay with me. You're not quitting tonight. Not while I'm here." Minutes dragged. Each one felt like a battle against the inevitable. Sweat dripped into Ethan's eyes as he adjusted clamps, tightened wires, pumped air. His own chest hurt with each shallow breath the child took. Then it happened. The child gasped, its chest rising stronger. The glowing veins along its body pulsed brighter, steadier. A soft hum filled the air, almost like a purr, faint but alive. Ethan froze, staring. His mouth fell open. It's working." The dragon let out a sound unlike anything Ethan had ever heard. Not a roar, not a growl, but something closer to a sob. Its massive shoulders shook, wings quivering as golden eyes glistened. The child shifted, whispering weakly in a tongue Ethan didn't know. The words were broken, barely sounds, but the meaning was clear. Life had returned. Ethan sat back, trembling, his tools scattered in the dirt. His hands shook, covered in grease and blood. That wasn't quite human. He had done it. He had kept the spark alive. For a heartbeat, the scrapyard was silent, broken only by the soft breathing of the child. Ethan's chest rose and fell with ragged relief. But beneath it, fear twisted tighter. Because if this dragon and her child were here, then something else was out there. Something had hurt them. Something human. And now, that something would come looking. The scrapyard still felt too quiet, even though Ethan's ears rang from the dragon's roar. The child breathed, but weakly, and Ethan's hands were still shaking from the rush of what he had just done. The dragon lowered its massive head closer, so close Ethan could see the cracks along its scales. Faint burns marred its chest, glowing faintly in the moonlight. This creature wasn't just carrying wounds on its child. It was wounded too. "You save him," the dragon rumbled, its voice low but trembling. The words sounded rough, almost broken, as if the language itself scraped against its throat. Ethan swallowed hard. His mouth was dry, but he forced himself to speak. I only kept him breathing. He's not safe yet. I don't even know what his body is supposed to be like." The dragon blinked slowly. Golden eyes glistened with something that startled Ethan. Fear. For all its size and power, the mother was terrified. She shifted her claws around the child, protective but hesitant. Too small, too weak, needs more. Ethan rubbed his forehead with his sleeve, smearing grease and sweat. His mind raced. He was no doctor, no scientist. He was a mechanic who patched up broken engines and dead batteries. But somehow, in this impossible night, a living creature from another world trusted him more than anyone else. He sat back on his heels and looked at the child again. Its glowing veins pulsed faintly, but the wound on its chest bled a strange liquid, dark, metallic, almost alive. He knew enough to recognize poison when he saw it. What did this to him? Ethan asked carefully. The dragon's jaw clenched. She tilted her head, looking away toward the sky. Her wings trembled. Hunters. Machines. Human fire. Not accident. Ethan froze. His stomach twisted. Humans attacked you? The dragon's eyes snapped back to him. Yes. The word cut through the air like a blade. Ethan's heart pounded louder. Questions screamed in his head. How? Why? Since when are there aliens here? But the child let out a weak whimper that silenced them all. All right, he muttered, forcing himself to focus. First things first, keeping him alive. He stood and ran back into his workshop, grabbing more supplies, an old water tank, a box of tubing, even a portable car battery. His hands flew, rigging a crude pump to flush the wound, wires to power a weak pulse of steady current, something that might shock the alien system into fighting the poison. When he returned, the dragon shifted uneasily, her massive tail scraping along the ground. Her breath blew hot against his back as he knelt again beside the child. Hold him steady, Ethan said, his voice trembling but firm. The dragon's enormous claw hesitated, then gently pressed the child's shoulders down. The sight nearly broke Ethan. The contrast of such deadly power used so carefully, so desperately, to protect something fragile. Ethan set his pump in motion. Clear water hissed against the wound, carrying away that strange metallic blood. The child cried out, a sound both human and not, and the dragon growled low, her eyes flashing. Stop, she demanded, teeth bared. Ethan shook his head furiously. No, if I stop, he won't make it. Trust me, please. The dragon's breath roared over him, hot and furious, but she didn't stop him. Minutes passed. The fluid ran clearer, the glow in the veins steadied. Ethan attached the wire ends of battery, sending a faint pulse through the child's small body. The reaction was instant. The glow brightened, and the child gasped, chest rising stronger than before. Ethan nearly fell back with relief. It's working again, he whispered. The dragon lowered her head even closer. Her golden eyes softened as she looked at her child. Alive! For the first time, Ethan heard warmth in her voice. Not the voice of a beast, but of a mother. He leaned back on his hands, exhausted. His arms trembled, and his chest heaved with ragged breaths. I don't know how long I can keep patching him up. This isn't enough. He needs medicine, something real, not this junk. The dragon's gaze sharpened. You fix. You save. Ethan shook his head. I'm trying. But if your people were attacked, then somebody out there already knows you're here. And if humans shot you down, the military will come looking. The dragon's wings twitched, spreading wide before folding again. We ran. We hid. They follow. Her voice broke, and she bowed her head lower. Nowhere left. Only here. Ethan stared at her, heart racing. Only here. This scrapyard, his forgotten home at the edge of town, was the last place they could turn. The child stirred faintly, opening strange eyes for a split second. They glowed soft silver, locking onto Ethan. Tiny fingers, weak and trembling, curled against his grease-stained sleeve. The touch froze him. His throat tightened, and he felt something shift in his chest. You're safe, he whispered, though the words were a lie. He wasn't sure if he could protect them. He wasn't sure he even believed this was real. But in that moment, he meant it. The dragon saw the gesture. Her eyes narrowed, searching his face. Why help? Why not run? Ethan hesitated. He thought about lying, about saying something brave or clever. But in the end, he only said the truth. Because it's a kid, and kids deserve a chance. The dragon's massive chest rose and fell. A long silence hung between them, filled only by the faint hum of Ethan's improvised machine. Finally, the dragon bowed her head low, so low her snout almost touched the ground before him. Then, I trust you. Ethan's mouth went dry. He had never heard words so heavy, so dangerous. And just as that fragile trust began to form, a distant noise cut through the night. A hum, mechanical, growing louder. Ethan's head snapped toward the sky. Faint red lights flickered above the horizon, moving fast. His heart plummeted. Drones. Military ones. The dragon rose, wings flaring, her body towering again. She growled deep, a sound that made Ethan's bones vibrate. They come. Ethan scrambled to his feet, panic racing through him. If they find you here, they'll kill you both. And me, too, for helping. The dragon bared her teeth. Then hide us. Mechanic. Now. Ethan's breath caught. He looked around at the scrapyard. The towers of junk, the broken machines, the secret corners he knew like the lines of his own hands. Maybe, just maybe he could, but the red lights were getting closer. Time was running out, and Ethan realized that saving the child's life was only the beginning. Now he had to save them all. The hum of engines grew louder. Ethan's chest tightened as he glanced at the sky. At first, it was just faint red glimmers in the distance. Now, the glimmers had become sharp points of light, circling like vultures. Military drones. Ethan knew the type. Surveillance and strike crafts built to scan the ground, locate threats, and, if needed, eliminate them. His stomach twisted as the memory returned. Years ago, when the government had tested prototypes near his town, the machines had looked almost identical, but now they weren't scanning deserts or empty forests. They were scanning his scrapyard. "They're coming closer," Ethan whispered, his throat dry. The dragon mother's wings twitched, scales rattling faintly in the moonlight. Her eyes narrowed, golden fire glowing in the dark. "If they find us, we fight." Ethan spun on her, panic flaring. "No. You fight, they'll kill you. You'll light this place up like a war zone. And then I'm done for two." The dragon bared her teeth. Her voice dropped, sharp and furious. Better fight than die hiding. Ethan's pulse hammered. His brain screamed at him to run, to leave, to let this alien problem be someone else's nightmare. But when his eyes drifted back to the child, lying weak and trembling under the dragon's claw, something anchored him in place. The boy's small hand had grabbed his sleeve earlier, gripping life itself. He couldn't walk away now. "Listen to me," Ethan said, voice low and urgent. "You want him to live? Then you need to trust me. No fighting. No fire. Not now." The dragon growled deep, so low the ground shivered under them. For a terrifying moment, Ethan thought she might ignore him, unleash her fury into the sky. But then, slowly, hesitantly, she lowered her head, her massive body curving, shielding her child, while her eyes locked onto Ethan. "Trust," she whispered. The word carried weight. "A vow." Ethan nodded quickly, though his insides twisted. "All right, then follow me." He darted into the scrapyard, weaving between stacks of rusted car doors and broken engines. The dragon shifted, dragging her child carefully in her claws. Each movement sent scrap tumbling, clattering too loud for Ethan's comfort. He winced with every crash. "Quieter," he hissed, glancing at the sky. The red lights had spread now, 3 drones circling above like hawks. Their faint beams of white light scanned the ground, sweeping dangerously close. The dragon pressed lower, crawling on her belly, wings folding tight to her sides. It was surreal, a creature so vast, so powerful, reduced to crawling through piles of human trash at the order of a single desperate mechanic. Ethan led them toward the far end of the yard, where old shipping containers lay stacked like forgotten giants. One had a false floor, a hideout his father had built years ago for when debt collectors came snooping. Ethan had always thought it paranoid. Tonight, it felt like salvation. "Here," Ethan whispered harshly, tugging at the rusted container door. It screeched, loud enough to make him wince, but it opened wide. He scrambled inside and pointed. "There. Crawl in. Stay low. Don't make a sound." The dragon hesitated, eyes flicking between him and the dark space. Her claw tightened protectively around her child. "Trap." Ethan's chest clenched. For a heartbeat, he realized how fragile this moment was. If she decided he was betraying her, he'd be dead before he could blink. He lifted his hands slowly. "No trap. I'm trying to keep you alive. You have to believe me." The dragon's gaze pierced through him, molten and unyielding. Finally, she lowered her head, nudging her child gently inside. The boy whimpered. Faint light flickering under his skin, but the mother curled her massive body into the cramped space. Metal groaned under her weight. Her golden eyes glowed faintly from the shadows. Ethan pulled the door shut, leaving only a crack for air. Then the drones arrived. The beams of white light cut through the scrapyard like knives. Ethan flattened himself against a pile of broken engines, heart pounding so hard it echoed his ears. The hum of the drones filled the night, their metallic wings slicing the air. A robotic voice crackled through a loudspeaker. Unidentified heat signature detected. Sector 9 confirm anomaly. Ethan's blood ran cold. They were scanning the yard. Another voice, sharper, came through. Sector 9 confirms. Large mass, irregular movement, possible unauthorized craft. Prepare strike. His breath caught. They'd seen the dragon. No, no, no. Ethan whispered, panic rising. His eyes darted across the yard, desperate for a distraction. Then he saw it. The old generator he'd been working on earlier. Without thinking, he sprinted toward it. His boots slammed the gravel, echoing loud on the drone searchlights. He dropped to his knees, yanking wires free, twisting metal, jamming a wrench into the core. Sparks burst. A second later, the generator erupted in a violent flare of fire and smoke. The scrapyard lit up in a blaze of sparks. The drone's lights shifted instantly. Sirens wailed, robotic voices barking. Explosion detected. Energy spike at Sector 12. Recalculate target. Ethan fell back, coughing on smoke, his heart thundering. He glanced toward the containers. The dragon's golden eyes glowed faintly from within the shadows. Waiting, trusting, the drone circled the fire, scanning, calculating. One swooped low, its red light pulsing as it scanned the ground. Ethan pressed himself deeper into the shadows, holding his breath. Finally, after what felt like hours, the machines began to retreat. Their engines roared as they rose higher, pulling back toward the sky. The red glimmers grew faint again, swallowed by the clouds. Silence. Ethan collapsed against the scrap pile, lungs burning. His hand shook so badly, he almost dropped his wrench. The container door creaked open. The dragon's massive head emerged slowly, eyes narrowing. Gone. Ethan nodded, still gasping for air. For now. The dragon shifted, her body unfolding as she pulled her child close again. She studied Ethan, her golden eyes softer this time. You risked yourself. He wiped sweat and grease from his brow. Yeah, well, I didn't really have a choice, did I? The dragon tilted her head, considering him. Then, to his shock, she lowered her head close enough that her golden eyes locked with his. You chose, she said firmly. Ethan froze. The truth of the words hit him harder than he expected. Yes, he had chosen. He could have run, could have left them, but he didn't, and that choice had changed everything. The child whimpered softly, and the dragon curled protectively around him once more. Ethan stared at them, mother and child, fragile yet fierce, alive only because of trust that none of them had expected. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning, because the drones had scanned his scrapyard. The military would be back. Next time, they wouldn't just send machines. They would send men. The night dragged on heavy and tense after the drones left. The scrapyard smelled of smoke and oil from the exploded generator. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was a kind of silence that warned a storm still building. Ethan leaned against a pile of scrap, chest heaving, his shirt clinging to sweat. His arms still shook from adrenaline. He had barely caught his breath when the dragon emerged from container again, her wings folding tightly against her body. Her child lay curled against her chest, breathing steadier now but still weak. The dragon studied Ethan in silence, eyes glowing like molten gold. He shifted under her gaze. What? He asked, voice rough. You risked much, she said, her deep voice quieter this time, less like thunder and more like a heavy drum. Why? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his messy hair. Because you came here asking me to save your kid. Because I couldn't stand there and watch him die. And because... He trailed off, struggling to find words. He shook his head. Look, I don't even know why. I just did it. The dragon tilted her head, as if weighing his words. Then she lowered her massive body to the ground, curling around her child again. Ethan noticed her claws trembling slightly as she pressed them gently against a wound on the child's chest. Ethan crouched closer, cautiously. Let me look again. The dragon rumbled, but didn't stop him. He knelt beside the child, lifting the makeshift tubing and wires he had used earlier. The wound was still open, though no longer gushing that strange metallic blood, but the flesh around it looked wrong. Black streaks spread outward like veins of ink, pulsing faintly. Ethan's stomach tightened. "That doesn't look like normal injury," he muttered. "That's spreading, almost like corrosion." The dragon's gaze sharpened. "Poison. Human weapon. Made to kill us." Ethan's hands froze. He turned his head sharply toward her. "Wait. Human weapon? Are you saying humans, built something that did this to your kid?" Her lips pulled back, exposing sharp teeth. "Yes." Ethan shook his head furiously. Try and make sense of it. No, that doesn't make sense. We've barely even discovered basic signals from space. No official contact. And you're telling me humans already have weapons to hurt your kind? How? Her growl cut him off, low and fierce. "Not all humans. Hunters. Few. Secret. They found us first." Ethan's heart sank. The words hit him like ice water. Secret hunters. That explained the drones, the weapons that had burned her child. Not the military openly, but something hidden. "Why?" he asked quietly, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. The dragon's golden eyes dimmed with sorrow. "Because we ran. Because we fled our war. They saw us not as people, but prey." Ethan stared at her, mouth dry. Prey. The thought twisted his stomach. These beings weren't invaders. They were survivors. He sat back, rubbing his temples. "God, all my life, I thought if aliens showed up, it'd be war or peace treaties. Never thought it'd be this." The child stirred suddenly, letting out a faint sound. Ethan leaned close. The boy's silver eyes flickered open for a moment. They glowed faintly, reflecting moonlight. His lips moved, whispering something Ethan didn't understand. The language was alien, full of clicks and tones, but the tone carried pleading. The dragon mother lowered her head to him, crooning softly, answering in her tongue. The sound was strange, but it was unmistakably the voice of comfort. Ethan swallowed hard. He felt like an intruder watching this moment, but something about it clawed at his chest. He couldn't explain why, but he wanted to help more. "Look," Ethan said, his voice gentler now. "If that poison keeps spreading, I'll need better supplies. This junk I won't hold for long." The dragon's head lifted. "What supplies?" "Medical equipment, antibiotics, clean bandages, maybe even something electronic I can adapt. But I can't just walk into a hospital and say, 'Hey, I've got an alien kid bleeding out in my shed.' They'd lock me up." The dragon's growl rumbled deep. "Then how?" Ethan exhaled slowly. His mind raced. He thought of the black market dealer who sometimes came around, selling off stolen equipment, scanners, nanotech scraps, old army supplies. Dangerous to deal with, but possible. "I might know someone," he said reluctantly. "But if I go, you'll have to stay hidden here. And if those drones come back—" "I will protect him," the dragon said firmly, curling her claws tighter around her child. Ethan nodded, though fear gnawed at him. He rose and started pacing, his mind spinning. But something nagged at him. His eyes drifted back to the wound, to the black streaks still spreading under the skin. He leaned closer again, lifting his flashlight. And then he froze. Embedded in the wound, just beneath the skin, was something metallic, small, jagged, glinting faintly in the glow of the child's veins. Ethan's hand trembled as he pulled a tool from his belt and carefully nudged at it. A fragment. His eyes widened. He knew this metal. The edges were sharp, but the alloy was unmistakable. He had worked with it before, government-grade composite, used in experimental human weapons. This is human," Ethan whispered. The dragon's gaze hardened. "I told you." Ethan felt sick. He had proof now, not just words. This child had been struck down by human technology. But why? He stood quickly, pacing again. His breath came ragged. If a secret group was hunting aliens on Earth, then they wouldn't stop. They would track this dragon and her child to the ends of the planet. And anyone who helped them, his throat tightened. Anyone like me. The dragon's deep voice broke through a spiral. "You see now." Ethan turned back to her. Her golden eyes glowed fiercely. We are not enemies. We seek life. But your kind hunts. They will come again. Stronger. More. Ethan's hands curled into fists. His mind screamed at him to back away, to cut ties now before it was too late. But the sight of that child, barely clinging to life, and the desperation in the mother's eyes crushed that thought. He drew a shaky breath. Then we don't have long. I'll get what I can. I'll fix this. Somehow. The dragon lowered her head, her molten gaze burning into him. If you do this, you are no longer only mechanic. You are protector. The word echoed in his chest like a hammer. Protector. He didn't feel like one. But maybe, for tonight, he would try. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it a faint, unnatural hum. Ethan's stomach dropped. He knew that sound now. The drones were returning. And this time they wouldn't come alone. The hum returned, louder this time, cutting through the scrapyard silence like a blade. Ethan froze, his hand still clutching the flashlight. The dragon's head rose sharply, nostrils flaring, her golden eyes flashing with alarm. The child stirred faintly under a claw, letting out a weak cry. The sound pierced Ethan's chest. He didn't need to look at the sky to know what it meant. The hunters were coming back, and they weren't alone. The dragon's wings flexed, scraping against the shipping container walls. Her tail lashed nervously, rattling piles of junk. They hunt us again, she growled, the sound low and furious. Ethan's mind spun. He darted to the edge of the yard, peering through gaps between the stacked cars. Red beams swept across the horizon. Not just drones this time. He could make out the faint silhouette of armored vehicles crawling down the road, headlights dimmed, but their engines rumbling like thunder. They're moving it on the ground. Ethan whispered, his mouth dry. Not just machines, men too. The dragon snarled, her voice sharp. We fight. They bleed. Ethan whirled on her, panic flashing. No. You breathe fire or whatever it is you do, and the whole damn town will see it. You'll paint a target on this place the size of the moon. We need to stay hidden. Her eyes narrowed, molten and dangerous. Hide forever? They kill us anyway. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He glanced back at the child, his silver eyes flickering open and shut, his body trembling with every breath. Ethan felt a hard lump in his throat. If the hunters stormed in, the boy wouldn't survive another move. He had to think. Fast. He raked his hand through his hair, eyes darting across the scrapyard. His gaze landed on the rows of gutted vehicles, piled high like walls. His father had always joked the place was a maze. Maybe tonight, that joke could save them. Follow me, Ethan said quickly, grabbing a set of keys from his belt. I know we can move you without being seen. The dragon tilted her head, suspicion flashing. Move him now? Too weak. Too weak to run, yeah. Ethan said, pointing at her claws. But not too weak if you carry him. We just can't let them track you from the sky. The dragon hissed low, but when the rumble of engines grew louder, she finally nodded. She scooped her child gently against her chest, her wings folding tightly against her sides. Stay close, Ethan said, his voice sharper than he intended. He led her through narrow paths between stacked cars and rusted machinery. The moonlight barely touched the ground here, shadows swallowing them whole. Ethan's heart hammered with each step, every crunch of gravel sounding too loud. Above them, drone lights swept dangerously close. At one point, a beam of white light skimmed the top of the scrap pile, reflecting off a car door. Ethan yanked the dragon under a collapsed bus frame just as the drone passed overhead. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his temple. The dragon's growl rumbled softly, but she kept low, her body pressed tight to the ground as she shielded her child. Ethan forced his legs to move again. They wound deeper into the maze until they reached an old maintenance shed tucked behind piles of tractor frames. The door hung crooked, rust eating its edges. Ethan shoved it open, dust spilling out. Inside, he hissed. The dragon squeezed through, her scales scraping against the doorframe. She curled her massive body inside, crouched low, holding her child close. Ethan shoved old tarps and sheets of metal against the door, burying the entrance in shadow. Not perfect, he muttered, but better than out there. The dragon's golden eyes followed him in the dark. You know this place well. It was my father's, Ethan whispered, crouching by the window slit. I grew up running through these piles. Guess that finally pays off. The dragon's gaze softened just slightly. But before Ethan could say more, movement outside caught his eye. Headlights. 2 armored trucks rolled into the scrapyard entrance, engines rumbling. Men spilled out, dark silhouettes with rifles and scanning equipment strapped to their backs. Their movements were precise, too clean to be regular military. Hunters. Ethan's throat went dry. He watched as they spread out, scanning the yard with handheld devices. Their voices carried faintly on the wind. Thermal spike was here. Check under the scrap piles. Command wants the specimens alive if possible. Ethan felt his blood run cold. Specimens. They weren't talking about threats or enemies. To them, the dragon and her child weren't even people, just prey to capture. The dragon's growl vibrated through the floor. Her claws tightened around her child, teeth bared. Ethan pressed a finger to his lips. Quiet, he mouthed, but she wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed on the hunters outside. Fury burned her eyes, golden fire barely restrained. Ethan leaned closer, whispering fiercely. If you attack them, they'll call reinforcements. You won't survive, and neither will he. Please, trust me again. Her chest rose and fell with harsh, shuddering breaths. For a terrible moment, Ethan thought she would ignore him, but then she turned her head slightly, just enough to lock eyes with him. You protect, she whispered. Ethan's chest tightened. Yeah, I will. The hunters drew nearer, flashlights cutting across the piles of junk. One beam slid over the shed for a heartbeat before moving on. Ethan held his breath, so long his chest ached. The dragon didn't move, though her body trembled with restrained rage. Finally, the men moved farther into the yard. Their voices faded slightly as they split into groups, each vanishing into different sections of the maze. Ethan slumped against the wall, lungs burning as he let out a slow breath. They weren't safe yet, but they had bought a little time. The dragon lowered her head near him, her golden eyes glowing in the dim. Why do you do this? Ethan blinked, surprised. What? You could leave. Run. Tell them. Save yourself. Her voice was sharp, but under was something else. A question. A test. Ethan stared at her, then at the boy curled against her scales, glowing faintly with life he had barely saved. He thought about the hunters outside, the cold way they said specimens. He thought about how alone this mother and child were, stranded in a world that wanted to kill them. And the answer came to him without doubt. Because if I don't, Ethan whispered, nobody else will. For the first time, the dragon didn't argue. She simply bowed her head, her breath shuddering. Outside, the hunters' voices carried again, closer this time. They're here. I can feel it. Ethan's stomach dropped. The chase wasn't over. It was only beginning. Ethan's heart hammered as he crouched inside the shed, his ears straining against the night. The hunters' voices grew louder again. Boots crunched against gravel and scrap metal clattered as they shoved aside broken doors and rusted frames. Thermal traces lead this way. Something big was here. Heat signatures don't lie. Fan out. Sweep every section. Ethan swallowed hard. He pressed his back against the wall, staring at the dragon. Her golden eyes blazed in the dark, her body tense as a drawn bowstring. She wanted to fight. He could feel it radiating off her like heat. But she held still, her child nestled beneath her, the faint glow of the boy's veins tucked under her protective claws. Stay quiet, Ethan mouthed again, his voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer, but her eyes never left his. He hoped she understood. Then, footsteps crunched directly outside the shed. A beam of light swept over the crooked door. Ethan's chest tightened. He held his breath, willing the hunters to move past. But the door creaked suddenly, groaning as a hand yanked it open. Ethan shot to his feet, forcing himself into the doorway before the hunter could step in. Hey, he barked, his voice rough but steady. This is private property. What the hell are you doing here? The hunter froze, his flashlight blinding Ethan's eyes. A tall man in dark armor, helmet gleaming under the beam, lowered his weapon slightly, but didn't back away. "Scrapyard?" the hunter said flatly, scanning the inside with the corner of his light. "Looks abandoned." Ethan shifted his body, blocking the view deeper inside. His pulse pounded so loud he thought it might shake the walls. "Yeah, well, it's mine. Been in the family for years. You got no right to be stomping in without permission." Another figure appeared behind the first, carrying a handheld scanner that beeped steadily. "We're tracking a signal. Unregistered. Non-human." His voice was cold, detached. "It came from here." Ethan forced a dry laugh. "Non-human? You're in a junkyard. Everything here's non-human. Rusted metal, broken engines, machines from 30 years ago. Pick your choice." The scanner beeped louder. The man raised his visor, eyes narrowing at Ethan. Then why is the heat signature fresh? Someone or something was here not long ago. Ethan felt sweat roll down his neck. His throat tightened, but he forced his shoulders to relax. He lifted his hand slowly in a half shrug. "I've been welding most of the night. That's heat. That's your signature. You're wasting your time." The two hunters exchanged glances. The one with the flashlight stepped closer, the beam sliding across Ethan's face. "You alone?" Ethan nodded firmly. "Always." "Anyone else around here? Strange vehicles? Unusual activity?" "Unless you count stray cats and raccoons, no." Ethan kept his tone steady, but his insides twisted. The man with the scanner leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You sure about that?" Ethan forced himself not to flinch. "Positive." Behind him, in the shadows, he could feel the dragon's heat. He imagined her teeth bared, her wings tensed. If these men pushed past him, they'd see her, and then everything would explode. "Search the shed," the scanner man said suddenly. Ethan's chest seized. "Hold on," he snapped, planting himself firmly in the doorway. "You've got no warrant, no papers, nothing. You can't just storm through here. This is my land." The flashlight hunter tilted his head, smirking faintly. "You hiding something?" Ethan's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. "I'm hiding my business from a couple of trespassers, yeah." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the faint hum of the scanner. The dragon shifted behind him, her scales scraping faintly against the metal wall. The sound was subtle, but Ethan saw the hunter's head twitch slightly at the noise. His blood froze. Before the man could speak, Ethan barked out, louder this time, "Look, I told you I was welding." "That's all your machine picked up." "You don't believe me? Go ahead and sweep the yard. You'll find plenty of heat signatures in busted engines. But you're not stepping into my shed." The flashlight hovered on him for a long, unbearable moment. Then the hunter finally stepped back, lowering it. "Fine," he muttered. "But if you're lying, you won't like who comes next." The scanner man gave Ethan one last piercing look before turning. "Sweep the east section. If it's not here, it's nearby." Their footsteps receded, voices fading as they moved deeper into the scrapyard. Ethan slumped against the doorframe, his chest heaving silently. His hands trembled as he slowly closed the shed door again. When he turned, the dragon's eyes burned at him from the dark. Her growl was soft, questioning. "You lied for us." Ethan nodded weakly, collapsing onto an overturned crate. "Yeah, guess I did." The dragon tilted her head, studying him as if she couldn't quite decide what kind of creature he was. Finally, she lowered her massive head close enough that her breath washed hot across his face. "You protect," she said softly. Ethan laughed bitterly. "More like I just painted a bigger target on myself. They'll be back, and next time, they'll bring more than flashlights." The dragon curled back around her child, her golden eyes dimming with exhaustion. "Then we prepare." Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. He knew she was right, but he also knew how impossible it felt. He was just a mechanic in a broken-down yard. What could he possibly do against trained hunters armed with weapons designed to kill creatures like her? He looked at the child again, watching the faint glow of his veins flicker weakly. Despite everything, the boy was still alive. And somehow, he had a feeling that keeping him that way meant more than he could yet understand. As the night dragged on, the hunters' voices drifted farther away. For now, they had survived. But Ethan couldn't shake the truth he had seen in their eyes. They suspected him, and suspicion was only one step away from destruction. The scrapyard was quiet again, but Ethan knew it was the wrong kind of quiet. It wasn't peace. It was pressure, the kind that builds before something breaks. The hunters had pulled back, their voices fading into the night. But Ethan could still feel the weight of their suspicion pressing on him. He sat slumped against the shed wall, his hands still trembling. The dragon mother had curled tightly around her child, wings folded like a protective cocoon. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the shadows, watching him. "You lied for us," she said softly, her voice a rumble low enough to shake the ground. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. "Yeah, and they'll be back. Sooner than you think." She tilted her head. "Yet you stayed." Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "Guess I'm dumber than I thought." The dragon's gaze lingered on him for a long moment, then turned down to her child. She nudged the boy gently with her snout, crooning in a language Ethan didn't understand. The child stirred. Ethan straightened immediately, his chest tightening. For the first time since that impossible arrival, the boy's eyes opened wider. Silver irises, glowing faintly, locked onto Ethan. They weren't dull and fading anymore. They were alive, sharp, aware. The child's lips moved, whispering in broken sounds. Ethan leaned closer, frowning. What's he saying? The dragon's gaze softened. He says, "Protector." Ethan blinked, his throat tight. "Protector?" The boy's small hand twitched weakly, reaching toward Ethan. His fingers brushed against Ethan's grease-stained sleeve, clinging as if recognizing him. The dragon lowered her head. "He remembers." You save his breath. "He names you Protector." Ethan swallowed hard. He had no answer. He wasn't a hero, wasn't even someone who believed in himself most days. Yet this alien child, this fragile, glowing being, looked at him with trust in his silver eyes. The boy coughed weakly, then spoke again. This time, the words were broken, but clear enough that Ethan understood. "Help us." Ethan froze. He just spoke English. The dragon's voice was solemn. "He learns quickly. Your tongue is new, but he listens." Ethan stared, stunned. Then he leaned closer. "Help you how? What do you need?" The boy's silver eyes flickered brighter. His voice cracked with weakness, but his words carried a weight far beyond his small frame. "No war, no fight. We run, we hide. Enemy follows." Ethan's skin prickled. He glanced at the mother. She nodded grimly. "Our kind, hunted, across the stars. We fled our world, broken by war. We came seeking refuge, seeking allies. But here," she trailed off, teeth bared faintly. "Here we found hunters." Ethan's heart pounded. Refugees. That was what they were. Not conquerors, not monsters, not invaders, but survivors. And humans, the hunters, were making them prey again. The boy gripped Ethan's sleeve tighter, his silver eyes glowing fiercely despite his frail body. "Protector, please." Ethan's throat closed. He wanted to say he wasn't Protector, that he was just a mechanic with rust on his hands and a yard full of junk. But the way the child looked at him, with trust so pure it hurt, silenced every excuse. "All right," Ethan whispered hoarsely. "I'll help. I don't know how yet, but I'll help." The dragon's golden eyes softened. She bowed her massive head slightly, as if an acknowledgement of a pact. "Then you are one of us now." Ethan shook his head faintly, his nerves still raw. "One of you?" "Lady, I'm just a guy with a toolbox. I'm not a soldier." "I'm not." The boy interrupted, his voice faint but certain. "Protector." The word landed like a stone in Ethan's chest. He exhaled slowly, realizing there was no escaping it anymore, whether he wanted to or not. He had been pulled into something far larger than himself. A noise outside shattered the fragile calm. Ethan tensed instantly. He peered through a slit in the shed wall and saw a beam of red light sweep across the yard. Drones again, not retreating this time, patrolling. The hum of their engines buzzed sharp in his ears. "They're circling," he whispered. They didn't buy my story after all. The dragon's body tensed, her claws curling protectively around her child. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't just keep hiding them here. The hunters were tightening their net. If they searched long enough, they'd find the dragons. And then no amount of lies could save them. The boy coughed again, his voice trembling. Safe place. Ethan looked down at him, then back at the dragon. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I know somewhere. But it won't be easy. The dragon tilted her head. Where? Ethan's mind flashed to the old tunnel system that ran beneath the scrapyard. Years ago, his father had dug it to hide parts from repo men and inspectors. No one outside his family ever knew it existed. The tunnels weren't big, but maybe big enough to shelter them. There's a tunnel, Ethan said quickly, hidden under the east piles. It's cramped, but it'll keep you off scanners. We can move you there before they sweep this side. The dragon's golden eyes narrowed, studying him. You would hide us, bury us under your world's waste. Ethan shook his head sharply. Not waste. Safety. If they find you here, it's over. Down there, they won't. Trust me. The dragon's gaze lingered on him. For a long, breathless moment, Ethan thought she would refuse. But then the boy's small hand tugged at her claw, whispering softly, Trust Protector. Her golden eyes softened. She nodded once, slow but firm. Show us. Ethan's pulse quickened. He grabbed a lantern and shoved the shed door open, scanning the night. The drone beam swung across the opposite side of the yard. Good. They still had time. He gestured urgently. Stay close. Quietly. The dragon rose, cradling her child carefully against her chest. Her wings folded tight. Her massive body crouched low as she followed Ethan to the labyrinth of rust and shadow. Each step was tense, every sound magnified in Ethan's ears. Finally, they reached the east piles, towers of crushed cars stacked high. Ethan dropped to his knees, pulling aside a panel of rusted sheet metal. Beneath it lay a hatch, half buried in dirt. He shoved it open, revealing a narrow stairwell dropping into darkness. Down here, he whispered. The dragon stared at the hole, suspicion flickering in her golden eyes. But the boy stirred in her arms, whispering one word again, Protector. With a deep, shuddering breath, the dragon lowered herself, squeezing through the hatch. Her scales scraped against the walls, sparks flickering as she forced her way down. Ethan followed, pulling the hatch shut above them. The tunnel smelled of earth and rust, but it was hidden, safe. For now, as they settled into the shadows below, Ethan lit the lantern. The boy's silver eyes flickered in the glow, staring at him with something that wasn't just gratitude. It was hope. Protector, the boy said again, stronger this time. Ethan sat back, his chest tight. For the first time, he didn't argue, because he realized the boy wasn't asking anymore. He was declaring it. And deep inside, Ethan knew the truth. Whatever was coming, his life as a simple mechanic was over. The tunnel smelled of damp earth and rust, but to Ethan, they felt like a lifeline. He crouched low, lantern flickering against the cracked concrete walls, while the dragon mother curled herself around her child in the narrow space. She didn't fit comfortably, her wings folded tight, her body pressed against the walls, but for the moment, they were safe. At least, that's what Ethan wanted to believe. Above them, faint vibrations shook the ground. He knew that sound. Heavy boots. Vehicles. The hunters weren't leaving. They were tightening the net. The boy stirred, silver eyes flickering faintly in the dim lantern light. His weak voice broke the silence. They come. Ethan's stomach nodded. The kid was right. They didn't have much time. He turned to the dragon mother. If they sweep the east yard, they'll find the hatch. And if they do, this tunnel won't matter. Her golden eyes narrowed. Then we moved deeper, farther. Ethan shook his head. No, the tunnels don't go much farther. My dad dug them years ago, but they weren't made for, well, he gestured at her massive body. For dragons. Her teeth bared faintly. You suggest we sit and wait to die? Ethan clenched his fists. No, I'm saying we need another way out. The ground vibrated again, Harder this time. Dust trickled from the tunnel ceiling. Ethan's pulse quickened. They were already here. The dragon growled low, curling tighter around her boy. I fight. You run. You live. Ethan's head snapped up. No, that's suicide. You'll die and so will he. You think those hunters want you alive? They don't. They want you in chains, or worse. Her eyes glowed fiercely. Better I die free than in chains. Ethan's chest tightened. He looked at the boy again. The kid's small hand trembled as it reached toward him, gripping his sleeve. That one word came again, soft but certain. Protector. Ethan closed his eyes. Damn it. He couldn't walk away. He rose suddenly, determination hardening his voice. I'll draw them off. The dragon blinked, startled. You? Alone? Ethan grabbed a wrench from his belt, shoving it into his pocket like a makeshift weapon. Then he pulled out a box of old detonators his dad had stashed in the tunnels. They were crude, meant for collapsing scrap piles during work. But in the right hands, they could make a hell of a distraction. I know this yard better than anyone, Ethan said, his voice rough but steady. Every corner, every weak spot. If I set charges and light up the west piles, it'll draw them away from here. They'll think you ran that way. It'll buy you time. The dragon's growl shook the tunnel. Too dangerous. You will die. Ethan forced a crooked grin, though fear knotted his insides. Story of my life. She lowered her head, her molten eyes boring into him. Why risk all for us? Ethan didn't hesitate. His voice was quiet but firm. Because he asked me to. The boy's silver eyes glowed faintly as he whispered again, Protector. For a long, heavy moment, the dragon studied him. Finally, she bowed her massive head. Then, I trust you. Ethan swallowed hard, his chest aching at those words. Trust. Again, that fragile bond between them deepened, and with it, the weight of responsibility pressed even heavier on his shoulders. He turned quickly, pulling the lantern closer. Stay here. Don't move until the noise stops. Then head deeper into the tunnels. There's an old exit near the quarry edge. It's hidden, but it leads out of town. That's your way out. The dragon rumbled low, uncertain. And you? Ethan forced a smirk, though his hands shook. I'll catch up. If I don't, well, at least you'll have a chance. The dragon's golden eyes softened. She lowered her head closer, so near he could feel the heat of her breath. Protector, she whispered, not just repeating the boy this time, declaring it herself. Ethan's throat tightened, but he forced himself to turn away. He couldn't afford to feel right now. He had work to do. Back above ground, the scrapyard had transformed into a battlefield of shadows. Drones hovered low, their red beams slicing to the piles of metal. Men in dark armor moved systematically, scanners humming, rifles at the ready. Ethan crouched behind a stack of gutted engines, his detonator box clutched tight. He felt naked, exposed. But he also felt something else, a strange, stubborn fire burning in his chest. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. Not tonight. He crept through the yard, planting small charges in the weakest spots. Old car frames, rusted fuel tanks, stacks of brittle sheet metal. His hands moved quickly, almost on instinct. He could hear his father's voice in his head. If you know how things break, you know how to make them break louder. The hunters drew closer, their flashlights sweeping dangerously near. Ethan ducked low, his heart pounding so hard it drowned out the hum of drones. He set the last charge and slipped back toward the center of the yard. He lifted the remote. His thumb hovered over the button. His breath came fast and sharp. For you, kid, he whispered. He pressed it. The night erupted. Explosions tore through the scrapyard, fire and smoke blasting into the sky. Towers of scrap collapsed like thunder, sparks raining down in showers of orange and white. The hunters shouted, scrambling as the west yard lit up in chaos. Sector breach. Multiple detonations. They're escaping west. Exactly what Ethan wanted them to think. He darted through the smoke, lungs burning, slipping between collapsing piles. Bullets pinged against metal as hunters fired blindly into the wreckage. Drones swooped low, their light scattering in the haze. But the east yard, the tunnels, remained untouched. Ethan's chest heaved as he ducked behind another pile, coughing on smoke. He peeked through the haze, watching the hunters swarm toward the chaos he created. It was working, but he knew it wouldn't last. They'd figure out soon enough. And when they did, they'd sweep every inch of this place until they found what they were looking for. Ethan slumped against the pile, sweat pouring down his face. His hands shook, but he forced a ragged laugh. Well, Dad, guess the old junkyard finally went out with a bang. Down below, in the tunnels, the dragon mother held her child close. The ground trembled with the force of explosions, dust falling from the ceiling. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the dark. She listened to chaos above, the roars of fire, the shouts of men, the hum of drones, and then to the fading echoes of it pulling away from the east. Her child stirred, whispering softly, "Protector?" And for the first time, she whispered it back. The last echoes of the explosion still rattled through the earth, dust drifting from the tunnel's ceiling like falling ash. Ethan stumbled down the narrow steps, coughing smoke from his lungs, the detonator remote still clutched in his trembling hand. His arms ached, his chest burned, but he was alive. Barely. The lantern's faint glow showed the dragon mother crouched protectively in the tunnel, her golden eyes fixed on him. Her body was tensed, ready for bad news. When she saw him emerge from the stairwell, battered but whole, her shoulders eased only slightly. "You return," she rumbled. Ethan dropped against the tunnel wall, breath ragged. "Yeah, still kicking. Don't ask me how." He wiped sweat and grime from his brow. They bought the distraction, for now, but they'll figure out soon. The dragon lowered her head, nostrils flaring. "You risked much." Ethan managed a faint grin. "Guess that's becoming a bad habit." He looked toward the boy. The child was still weak, his silver eyes half closed, his breathing shallow. But something was different now. The faint glow in his veins had grown brighter, pulsing stronger. Ethan frowned, crawling closer. "What's happening to him?" The dragon tilted her head, her gaze fierce but uncertain. "I do not know. He was fading. Now he glows stronger." Ethan leaned down, placing his hand gently against the boy's chest. His skin was still warm, almost hot, but the black streaks from the poison wound, they were shrinking. The corruption that had spread earlier was receding, inch by inch, like darkness retreating before light. Ethan's jaw slackened. "That's impossible." He blinked, and then it struck him. He glanced at the crude wire still attached to the boy's side, the makeshift stabilizer he had built earlier from the car battery and tubing. He had left it running, unsure if it would help or hurt. But now, "Oh my God," he whispered. "It's working." The dragon's eyes snapped to him. "What do you mean?" Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair, staring in disbelief. "My equipment, it's not just keeping him breathing. It's merging with him. His body is adapting to it. He's healing, not because of me exactly, but because his biology is using what I gave him." The dragon's gaze sharpened. "Explain." Ethan struggled for words. Humans fix machines with patches, wires, circuits, spare parts. That's what I did with him. I patched him like a machine, but he's not just surviving it. He's absorbing it. His body's healing by fusing with what I gave him. The boy stirred, his eyes opening wider. The silver glow was brighter now, sharp and vivid in the lantern light. His weak voice trembled, but this time it was stronger than before. "Protector?" Ethan's chest tightened. He gripped the boy's hand gently. "I'm here. You're gonna make it." The dragon lowered her massive head closer, eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and awe. "This is not natural. Our kind does not heal this way." Ethan shook his head. "Maybe not, but something about his biology and human tech, it's connecting, like he's meant to adapt." The boy's glow spread, silver veins brightening across his arms and chest. The jagged wound that had nearly killed him began to knit itself together, sealing slowly from within. Ethan watched in stunned silence as flesh repaired around the crude wires he had used, almost as if the alien tissue was consuming the technology and making it part of him. Ethan whispered under his breath, "It's a miracle." The dragon's growl was low, conflicted, or a curse. Ethan looked up sharply. What do you mean? She drew back slightly, her wings rustling against the narrow walls. Our kind flees because we are hunted for what we are, for what we can become. If they learn my child can adapt even human weapons into his flesh, they will hunt us harder. They will not stop. Ethan's stomach sank. She was right. This boy's ability wasn't just survival. It was evolution. And if the hunters realized it, they would see him not as a refugee, but as a prize. The boy's silver eyes fixed on Ethan again, glowing so brightly now it was hard to look away. His voice was still soft, but filled with something new, resolve. Protector, we need you. The words hit Ethan harder than any explosion. He thought of himself, just a mechanic in a junkyard, a man who fixed broken engines and patched dead batteries. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't anyone important. And yet here he was, chosen by a dying mother, trusted by a wounded child, and now witnessing something incredible, something that could change everything. His throat tightened. He nodded slowly. Then you've got me. For as long as I breathe, you've got me. The dragon mother lowered her head, her voice a whisper of molten steel. Protector. The ground shuddered suddenly, shaking dust from the ceiling. Ethan froze, his heart seizing. Then came the sound. Boots. Dozens of them. Above ground. Stomping in rhythm. The hunters had rallied after his distraction. And this time, they weren't just searching. They were closing in. Ethan's blood ran cold. They're back. And this time, they won't stop until they tear this place apart. The dragon snarled, her body coiling protectively around her boy. Golden fire burned in her eyes. Then we fight. Ethan gritted his teeth, fear and determination warring in his chest. He knew they couldn't stay here. The hunters were too close. Too many. If they found a tunnel entrance, it would all be over. But then he looked at the boy again, glowing brighter with every breath, his body healing, his voice steadier. Something new was happening here, something beyond his understanding. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Ethan didn't just feel fear. He felt possibility. Maybe, Ethan muttered, his eyes narrowing, just maybe you're strong enough now to do more than hide. The boy's silver eyes locked with his, glowing like stars in the dark. Protector, he whispered again. But this time, it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like a promise. The ground above thundered with boots and the metallic hum of drones. Dust rained down into the tunnel as Ethan crouched against a wall, gripping a wrench in one hand and his father's detonator box in the other. His lungs burned, his mind raced, but one truth hammered in his chest. They'd found him. The dragon mother pressed her massive body protectively around her son. Her golden eyes gleamed in the lantern's glow, fierce and unyielding. They come, she growled. The boy stirred in her claws, but he was no longer frail. His silver eyes glowed brighter than ever, veins shimmering like flowing metal. The wound on his chest was nearly gone, healed by some fusion of alien biology and Ethan's crude human tech. He sat upright now, still small and fragile in form, but carrying an aura of power Ethan had never seen before. They will not stop, the dragon whispered. Not until they break through. Ethan clenched his jaw. He could hear the muffled shouts above, men barking orders, scanners buzzing. It wouldn't be long before they found the hatch. His heart pounded like a war drum. Then, to his shock, the boy spoke. Not in broken words, not in fragments, but clearly, firmly, in English. No more running. Ethan stared. His throat tightened. Kid, you? The boy turned his silver gaze on him, steady and unwavering. Protector, you stood for me. Now I stand. The dragon mother's eyes widened in disbelief. She whispered in her tongue, her voice breaking. But the boy shook his head. His glow spread brighter, casting silver light across the tunnel. The hunter's boots pounded directly above. Metal scraped. Voices barked. Thermal spike below ground. Targets under us. Prepare breach. Ethan's stomach sank. They'd found the tunnel. All right, he muttered, gripping the wrench tighter. Looks like it's showtime. He moved toward the ladder, leading back up, but the dragon's massive claw stopped him, blocking his way. Her molten gaze burned down on him. You would face them alone? Ethan forced a weak grin. Not exactly. I've got a dragon and apparently a miracle kit on my side. But somebody's got to take the first step. The dragon's lips curled, half snarl, half respect. She withdrew her claws slowly. The boy pushed against his mother's grip, standing shakily on his own two legs for the first time since Ethan had met him. His glow filled the tunnel like a living star. Ethan couldn't look away. Above, metal shrieked. A hatch ripped open. Floodlights blazed down into the darkness. Targets located. A voice shouted, "Move in." Hunters dropped into the tunnel, armored and armed, rifles raised. Drones hovered above the opening, beams locking onto the figures below. "Down!" one of the hunters barked. "Hands where we can see." His words cut off as silver light exploded outward. The boy lifted his hand, and the crude wires Ethan had attached earlier glowed like molten veins. Energy surged from him, tearing through the tunnel in a wave of silver fire. The hunters were thrown back against the walls, their scanners and rifles sparking violently. Ethan shielded his face, eyes wide. "Holy!" The boy's voice echoed, far stronger than his body should allow. "No more chains." The dragon mother unfurled her wings in the cramped tunnel, roaring with a sound that shook stone loose from the ceiling. She lunged upward, smashing through the hatch with her claws. Metal screamed as she burst out into the scrapyard above. Ethan scrambled after her, the boy's hand gripping his arm with surprising strength as he followed. They emerged into chaos. The scrapyard was swarming with hunters and drones. Floodlights cut across the night. Rifles glinted, orders barked. The explosions Ethan had set earlier still smoldered in the west, but the fight had come here now, directly to him. At the center of it, the dragon stood, wings spread wide, her roar splitting the night sky. The boy stepped forward beside Ethan, silver light pouring from his veins like living armor. Hunters aimed their weapons, but before they could fire, the boy raised his hands. The machines around them sparked, metal bending, circuits frying as if the very technology obeyed him. The hunters stumbled back, shouting in fear. Drones dropped from the air, their lights sputtering. Vehicles ground to a halt, engines smoking. Ethan gaped, his voice hoarse. He's controlling them. The dragon's golden eyes glistened. He is more than I imagined. The boy turned to Ethan, his silver eyes steady. "Protector, with you." Ethan's chest tightened. He nodded, gripping his wrench, even though it felt laughable compared to the boy's power. "Then let's finish this." Together, they moved through the yard. The boy's silver light cut through the hunters' ranks, disabling their weapons, bending their machines into twisted heaps. The dragon's roar scattered them, her claws and wings tearing through the metal piles like paper. Ethan darted between wrecks, using his knowledge of the yard to trigger collapses, block pathways, and trap enemies. For once, they weren't just surviving, they were winning. But Ethan knew it wouldn't last forever. Reinforcements would come, and when they did, this place would burn. As the last drone fell smoking to ground, the boy turned, his silver glow dimming slightly. His voice was calm, almost sorrowful. "We cannot stay. They will return stronger." Ethan's chest ached, but he nodded. "I know." The dragon crouched low, her massive body coiling. She lifted her child gently onto her back, then turned her molten gaze on Ethan. "You saved him," she said. Her voice was thick, heavy with meaning. "You saved us. My kind will not forget." Ethan swallowed hard, throat tight. "Just keep him safe. That's all I want." The boy leaned down from his mother's back, his silver eyes glowing softly. "Protector, we will return." Ethan's breath caught. For a moment, hope flared in his chest like fire. The dragon spread her wings. Dust and sparks swirled as the massive span blotted out the moon. With one last glance at Ethan, she launched upward, wings beating the air in thunderous waves. The boy's glow lit the sky like a star as they rose higher, higher, until the night swallowed them. Ethan stood alone in the scrapyard, the fires dying around him, the wreckage of machines smoldering in heaps. His wrench hung limp at his side, his chest heaving. It was over. For now. He looked up at the empty sky, the echo of wings still ringing in his ears. The boy's final words lingered in his mind. We will return. Ethan let out a shaky breath, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Guess I'll be waiting, kid. The scrapyard was silent again. But Ethan knew the truth now. One night had changed everything. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a protector. And somewhere out there, across the stars, a bond had been forged that no army, no weapon, no hunter could ever break.